And welcome into a special edition of KC Sports Night here on a Monday as Jared Koller rocking with Gabe Swartz here in the KC5 studios where the Royals season has ended. And today the team had their end-of-season press conference where they reflected on everything to come in 2024 and look ahead at some of the top storylines in 2025. So Gabe Swartz and I are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to have our end-of-year State of the Union around the boys in blue because, well, one, I've talked with Marlea and Campbell and Neil Jones on air about the Royals, but it's been a while since Gabe and I have touched base here, so it's a good time for that, knowing full well that there are a lot of other awesome sports going on right now in the Kansas City area. So for Chiefs coverage, KU basketball coverage, MU football, K-State football, we'll be talking about that all week, I'm sure, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Also the Kansas City Current playing well. So remember, KC Sports Night is a 7-day-week show, 2 times on the air on the weekends, Monday through Friday here streaming. So today we'll talk a little Royals, but know that there's a lot else going on as well. So, Gabe, before we get into today's press conference, your headline for the 2024 Royals is what?
Overwhelming success, the story of a bounce back that is unprecedented. That would be my headline for the 2024 Royals because barring, aside from if you bought into them winning the division once it was like mid-August and they had tied the division, had the lead based
Briefly,
off of the tiebreaker over Cleveland. Aside from that point, and that was kind of crushed by just injury, which is unlucky, everything else was a success. They won a playoff series. They made the playoffs. They improved upon their win total by 30. They had a better run differential in the regular season than either of the World Series teams from 2014 or 2015.
Yeah.
So, I would say the 2-word headline would just be overwhelming success.
Yeah, overwhelming. I like that. In one way, I like that because Matt Quintero would disagree with you, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But no,
he's going to disagree just because they're going to believe in themselves more than everybody else did.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why having different perspectives and different expectations, because you come at it from what were your I don't remember. Did you have like a win total prediction?
I thought that they would be a competitive team that wins 75 to 80 games and is not embarrassing themselves on a nightly basis the way that they did in 2023.
So only about 10 games off, which is a lot, but it's also not crazy. It is crazy though when you put last year compared to this year in a 30-win improvement. I mean, that is, we all thought they would play better, but to be 30 games better, I think that. Because you look at the 86 and 76, well, that's not the greatest record in the world. It's enough to make the playoffs. But when you think about that 30 number and the run differential that backs it up, this wasn't a team that backed their way in by just playing the White Sox all year. That narrative annoys the crap out of me. One, because the Royals don't have any control about that. Other teams also did very well against the White Sox. It's not like the Royals were the only team that played well against them.
The Dodgers get to play the Rockies every year.
Yep. Exactly, and other teams in the division did. The Royals just handled their business better than like the Guardians did against the White Sox, and that run differential wasn't all against the White Sox. So the fact that they were plus 91 speaks to that. No, they were a good all-around team.
It was an 86-win season despite 2 6-game losing streaks in September, and so I think that is why, and that's why I think as we discuss what they're going to add and what JJ Piccolo specifically mentioned wanting to add this offseason. I wrote a story on Friday last week about what the roster could look like next year and just going through who all is a free agent. Mm-hmm. Well, half the free agents are guys that were added late in the season, and that was kind of a patchwork thing to they couldn't just do a one person 1-for-1 fix or fill of what they lost when Vinny Pasquantino got hurt, but they could, in the aggregate, use 3 different guys to try, and it was not very successful. They were the worst offense in the MLB in September.
Might have been worse without those guys,
but
though.
yes, exactly. So I think what they do replacing that is kind of the big question. I don't think there's as many questions with the pitching staff. I think there's a ton of questions with what the batting lineup looks like next year.
Yeah. So, and the JJ Picola got into some of that today. I was at the Royals press conference. If you didn't hear it on our stream, you can watch Case 5 News at 6 and 10. I'll have some of the highlights from that. So, on that note, Gabe, from what you heard, anything jump out to you that Matt Quatraro said today, and or just in general your feelings on Matt Quatraro leading this ship now entering next year, what'll be his third season as Royals manager?
I think that what my general takeaway from the year is that there were things that you could complain about or you could take issue with of how Matt Quatraro manages certain things, but at times, and I think that a large portion of that was just the way the bullpen was used. But in hindsight, in retrospect, the bullpen got better. The bullpen got a lot better as the year went on, and you're kind of only a product of what you're given from a roster perspective. Yeah. And I'm not to say that this is a JJ Picola issue, because I think it was more of an organizational issue of they whiffed on Chris Stratton, they whiffed on Will Smith. Yes, those were the offseason moves for the bullpen. Everything else from a developmental standpoint,
I would throw Nick Anderson and John Schreiber in there as well.
Well, and John Schreiber was
but Nick Anderson was a whiff
successful. Yes. So 3 of the 4 offseason moves in the pen from a veteran perspective were whiffs. Now that's counteracted by overwhelming success with Lugo and Walker coming into the rotation.
Yep.
But I don't think that there's too much to complain about in that. I think that most of the bullpen failure early on was the kind of 2, 3, 4 years of just a complete wash in the farm system of bullpen arms.
Sure.
And it got better as the year went on. In fact, I think that one of the best things looking forward to next year is what August and September looked like for Lucas Hersig, for Angel Zerpa, for a John Schreiber, and Chris Bubich as well. Where I think that there's a decent chance the Royals bullpen is significantly better next year, and can counteract almost guaranteed regression in the starting pitching department, both from whether it's health or just success, because they were so good.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, and they'll have a lot. They'll have even more arms to throw at it next year with guys coming back from injury and development, and more guys coming in the system, regardless of whether or not they lose Michael Walker, which is a question. My note of Matt Quatraro came from today, something that he said throughout the season that I just want to reiterate to Royals fans. I know, Gabe, you're playing it off as, yes, every team believes in themselves, but I think there is a different level of belief that Matt Quatraro and this team had, more than normal and more than what would be considered sane when you consider a 106-loss team last year. Today, Matt Quatraro, when asked, have you been able to reconcile the fact that, hey, it was such an historic turnaround even though your season is over? And he's like, no, I struggle with that perspective because, yeah, we did a lot of great things right, but I think we should have won even more games in the regular season, and I think we're a really talented roster. I think we have a really talented coaching staff, and I think we could have and should have done more. And I just don't think hardly anyone outside of the Royals clubhouse and Royals front office shares that opinion. And that's one of the reasons why the Royals were so great, is because they simply believed in themselves more than anyone did. And that, Gabe, is a calling card of the 2014 and 15 Royals, who also didn't have people believing in them. They were guys that were top prospects that had failed at the major league level. People wanted them to move on from so many guys, but the organization stayed with them, had the belief that they would turn around, and they did. Now, those teams had more postseason success, obviously. But I want to give credit to Matt Quatraro for consistently pushing the right buttons this year to keep them in the race from game one, to weather the storm that was a near September collapse, and for instilling the confidence in this roster that, yes, we are a good team. Because I think it was a tough ask at the beginning of the year, Gabe, to say, yeah, this is a playoff team. But Vinny Pasquantino said it, the whole team said it, and they were that. And I think the manager's a big reason why.
I think that, in general, I agree with his takeaway of it's hard for him to feel like, oh, we shouldn't have won more games. And yes, that's because in September they had a 6-game losing streak that was all at home, or a 7-game losing streak with
7 games,
one in Pittsburgh and 6 straight at Kauffman, and then the other you had the 7 that came right after the injuries. Yeah. So objectively, yes, they should have won 2 or 3 of those home games, and they probably should have gotten to 88 or 89 wins. And you could argue that maybe the only thing that changes, it doesn't bother me a ton, because the only thing that maybe changes is they play the 4. They're the 4 instead of the 5, and they get Baltimore and Kansas City instead. So I don't think that the end result changes, but I think that's what he's talking about. I think the biggest thing, aside from the way that the bullpen was used, is I think that this will be whether they can do this or not will be determined by how successful they are this offseason with the free agent bats, is being more consistent with the batting order, because I think they shuffled a lot around aside from Bobby at 2, Vinny at 3, Salvi at 4.
But that was more by necessity, not by anything contrary.
And that's why I'm saying I think you would ideally have more than just 3 spots in the lineup that are a given every day, where we're at the point where every day the lineup card's coming out and you're thinking, what does 1, 5 through 9 look like?
But I think the days of how Ned Yost managed are gone. Like, I think even when it is a longer and better batting order, that there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. That's just Matt Quintera's approach. That's the approach of the Rays. You platoon guys, and really we saw this year they used their full roster, much to the chagrin of fans at times. But I think that's how they do it. They have certain roles for every guy, certain matchups for every guy, and I think you're going to see that more than a consistent starting 9 with occasional, this guy gets a day off after a night game or whatever. But I think that's a good transition, Gabe, to J.J. Picollo, because he talked about needing to improve the offensive production overall. He says for the season they were really pretty strong, which they were, but he said it was too hot and cold. There were too many not too many highs and too many lows. There are a lot of highs, but there are too many lows. Mm-hmm. And I think Royals fans saw that, where they had a lot of games where they'd score like 9 runs or whatever, and other games where they'd score 1. And one of the main things that they pointed out was, we need a leadoff hitter. They tried Michael Garcia there, and that didn't really work. In the playoffs, we saw Michael Massey there, and that kind of worked. We saw Tommy Pham at the end of the year, but I think they realized the value in that leadoff position, setting up Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, and Salvador Perez, who are entrenched in that 2 and 3, 4. And then the way Michael Massey was playing, even despite being not 100%, I think you can pencil him in that 5, 6, maybe even 7 role. And suddenly, when you have a leadoff hitter that can get on base, that lineup looks a lot better. So as far as what J.J. Picollo said today, that was one of the things that stood out, that he made it very, very clear, like, we need a leadoff hitter. And he said, another middle-of-the-order bat. I don't know if that's at the same priority level, but also alluding to, more outfield production and right and left, and then, of course, DH. So that gets into the off-season question portions of it. But J.J. Picollo, anything that he said today that stand out to you?
I thought it was that. But the way that he answered the question, or the way that he addressed it, I almost wonder if the door is left open for Michael Massey to be the answer as the leadoff hitter.
I didn't take it that way.
I'm not saying that was guaranteed the way that I interpreted it. I just thought that there was a way where it's like, well, did they feel like they didn't give Michael Massey enough, or his health didn't give Michael Massey enough opportunities
which they
to prove that he should be that guy?
I was glad they went on the record and said he was not 100% this whole year, which with a back injury, we don't know if he'll ever actually be 100%. So that's unfortunate. I took it more as kind of Michael Garcia, because they also talked about how young he is, how he loves big games, how they think he can get better. Maybe that, because I think he profiles more to that type of hitter, whereas they like Michael Massey in the middle of the order.
That's fair, yeah.
But I don't know, and I think Massey's spot is far more guaranteed than Garcia.
Yeah.
Especially at third base, where you can find more hitters. But he also had a lot of belief in MJ Melendez, which I think some fans maybe didn't want to hear or don't believe. I'm in the Team MJ camp, just because I think when you look at the tools that he has and how hard he hits the ball consistently, like, he consistently hits the ball hard. He does not, however, hit the ball consistently. There's a difference there between what I said, but that's legit. And maybe it's because I saw Mike Moustakas a decade ago have similar prolonged struggles. This was MJ's second full season in the majors. And I'm also a sucker for someone who has the clutch gene. And he does. He did. Like, we saw it in the regular season. But, Gabe, in the postseason, MJ was one of their better hitters from a exit velo, like from a pure hitting standpoint. He lined into a couple double plays. He had a number of warning track outs, and he also got on base with doubles in that home run. Like, MJ Melendez was one of the most valuable players in the postseason, advanced metric-wise. And so I think guys that can do that in the clutch, I'm willing to give him one more year, despite his overall numbers maybe not what you'd want.
I absolutely think that most of the failures or the viewpoint of him being a failure or a disappointment come from the lack of production around him, because he is, like, when his 2024 season looks eerily similar to Mike Moustakas' 2014. Like, if you do, like, I was debating this with some friends a couple weeks ago, and I just put up player A and player B stats.
Smart.
And people were wrong on which one was which of them.
Yeah.
Mostly because the underlying stats are nearly identical. In fact, a lot of them you lean MJ aside from.
Yes.
I think one of the only things that Moustakas did better was, like, RBIs.
Okay.
And that's kind of situational. So I wouldn't lean too heavily into that. So yeah, I'm not somebody who's giving up on MJ Melendez. I would say that next year is probably his last shot. But I wouldn't say he's a guy that you're moving on.
And I don't think the organization is either, because I thought this was one where they're saying, yeah, we need outfield depth. You know, we like MJ, but we also JJ was very upfront about his ceiling, which he didn't have to be. Now, if somebody went and offered them a lot for MJ Melendez, yes, I think they'd be open to trading him and whatnot. But I think they still see the value there more than maybe most fans, so I would prepare for that. And right now, I also have a lot of trust in J.J. Picollo to do the right thing, because when you look at what stood out this year, Gabe, Bobby Witt Jr. took another step forward, going to finish second in AL MVP voting. Salvador Perez had arguably his second best season as a pro, I would say. Nowhere near his first, where he hit 48 home runs and led baseball in RBIs a couple of years ago, but he made his 9th All-Star game. That was not a guarantee, because last year he kind of had a down year. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he was able to bounce back, I give credit to Paul Hoover and the Royals organization. Also for not trading Salvador Perez, seeing that he still had this in him. I give credit J.J. Picollo on that. And then the four names you see at the bottom there, they averaged 185 innings, which, like, a decade ago, that wouldn't stand out as much, because, I mean, we saw the James Shields, the Irvin Santana, the Jeremy Guthrie, like, they each threw 200 innings in 2013. No. In 2024, to have four guys average that, and the only one who missed time with injury was Michael Wacha. That was because he had a line drive off his foot. It wasn't an arm injury. He's crazy. And so I credit the organization for identifying Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, identifying Cole Reagans last year, and developing Brady Singer even more this year to be a legitimate, like, I know he didn't make a playoff start, but they said today he'd start in the ALCS. Like, Brady Singer was very good this year. He's a great middle-of-the-rotation arm. J.J. Picollo deserves a lot of credit for the biggest reason why the Royals were good this year, those four starting pitchers.
Yeah, and they get Kyle Wright into the rotation, or into the fold.
Yeah,
next
and Chris
year.
Bubich maybe.
And Chris Bubich maybe. And yeah, like you said about the injuries, Wacha, his is unlucky. He got one drilled off his foot. Alec Marsh got injured in May off of a ball that hit his forearm. And then Michael Lorenzen hurt his hamstring on a fielding at first base.
Also great trade for Michael Lorenzen as well. I don't know how much that initially paid up, but it depends on what you gave up in Walter Pennington. I think you can make an argument maybe they don't make the playoffs without Michael Lorenzen, because he had a handful of big starts.
3 or 4 really good
it
starts.
depends on what you think Alec Marsh would have done there, but that was a great trade. As if also Paul DeYoung kind of fell off, but Paul DeYoung probably won him a couple games. And then, of course, Lucas Erceg was incredible. Like, I don't think you make playoffs without Lucas Erceg, and I don't know if you win a playoff series without Lucas Erceg, and that it helped make up for Hunter Harvey, who J.J. Picollo mentioned today. I kind of forgot about him. They think Hunter Harvey can pitch in the 8th and 9th next year, so that goes back to your point earlier about how good this bullpen could be.
Yeah, and I think that with other things that stood out to us in terms of what Picollo said is with the way that he was discussing how John Sherman may invest in the team next year, I don't necessarily think that they will need to spend in the, like, Will Smith, Chris Stratton's of the world. I don't think they'll need to do that again, because they've got
more foundation,
more of pieces of what they're planning to with Harvey, with Ursig, with Zerpa, Schreiber, all those guys.
Yeah,
so if you don't need to spend on relief pitching as much, I think that what you're going to see is them go into the veteran bats department and kind of shop around
which
there.
They kind of did this year, but at a lower price point than maybe
yeah,
they
like
liked.
Something higher than Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier's of the world. I know that Frazier just had a down year compared to what he had been previously, but I mean, I was looking through MLB free agents for this offseason, and like a guy like a Tyler O'Neill in Boston, a corner outfielder with some pop. That's a guy who maybe you could
That's
play
a popular name, yeah.
in right field or something along those lines. So I don't know. It's really hard to see because teams see different things than what you see, and price points are different in terms of, do they want to go with 1-year deals? Do they want to give anybody a player option like they gave Waka on the pitching staff? I don't know.
And Lugo for that third year now.
Yeah, so I don't know what the investment will be, but I would anticipate that most of the signings that will be like they're still investing in this team, the way that it kind of alerted us last offseason when they signed Lugo and Waka. It was like, man, they're kind of spending on this team. I think that will all be in the batting department next year.
Yeah, I with the caveat, if Michael Waka, who has a player option, elects free agency, I think that might change. One, because that frees up money off the books right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think your rotation, you still have got more arms than you need, but I think you cannot count on the health. That was something else that they said today is like, we got lucky in the sense of how healthy everyone was. And next year when you've got Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo, Brady Singer as your top 3, Alec Marsh as your 4, and then a 5 of Kyle Wright or Chris Bubich or Daniel Lynch. I like that. That's strong. But when Seth Lugo goes down with an injury, then suddenly it gets a little bit tighter. And so that's where I don't know if they would spend, give a $15 million for 1-year contract like Michael Waka in that ballpark. But if they did lose Waka, I would expect someone at least on a 1-year deal that slots into that rotation at the beginning of the year. Maybe it's just a 5-star. Maybe like a Michael Lorenzen is probably a good someone I'm talking about. Someone kind of.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two is back.
Yeah.
Of Waka or Lorenzen.
Right. Yeah, I think, and if Waka's back, then I don't know if you need Lorenzen.
Yeah.
I think that goes hand in hand. But that's, and then Gabe, the bullpen arms. I mean, you mentioned a handful of guys, but also like is Sam Long. Was he just a 1-year?
No, I believe he's got
under
multiple
control.
years of
yeah,
control.
And he was one of their top guys. James McArthur, they have a lot of belief, and they didn't think he was right. And part of fan frustration is the role he was given. I don't think he's going to come anywhere near the 9th, but like, as far as being in a major league bullpen next year, you look at him. Carlos Hernandez looked really good at times, and then you don't know the role of Kyle Wright, Chris Bubich, Daniel Lynch. Then you factor in anyone else coming in. There's a lot more bullpen arms now than, as you said, last year, too. Yeah, I don't think they have to spend money on the Chris Strattons. The one that I'm curious about is Hunter Renfroe, because he has a player option that I assume he will exercise because he didn't have the year he probably wanted. He battled injury. But it was very odd to me how he was a key player for a lot of the year, but after his last injury, he never really got consistent playing time, and I think he had 5 at-bats in the postseason. Tommy Pham kind of replaced his role, and Pham was a guy who was cut, whereas Renfroe was a guy handed a big free agent contract. Not a big, but like more than Pham. And I think if they go with Melendez and left, they may really want an upgrade in right field or DH. And so I don't really know where Hunter Renfroe fits, because he's not really a utility like outfielder. He can't move around. I mean, he can kind of play first base, I guess. He's kind of the one that I'm curious how they will treat.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I also think like Chris Stratton does have an option.
Yeah. But that is one they're probably just going to have to eat.
Yeah.
But that was he likely looks extra. And maybe you send him into spring training and he finds a new pitch or whatever, so I wouldn't rule it out. But
it feels it's good to know for the Royals that they are shopping for contributors. They're not shopping for stars. Like they've you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms, or
I wouldn't
not,
mind one more hitting star.
Yes, but they're like they know what the core is. They know who's going to need to show up next year and be a stud to repeat the performance. They're not necessarily, and if JJ Picollo stumbles upon the Seth Lugo of middle-aged bats next season.
Well, I
that's
think
gold.
you can also look at trades. I mean, Cole Reagans, what a trade. Even someone like Nelson Velasquez. That's three names that I thought about today that I'm like, are they even on the team next year? That at one point we thought were part of their future. Nelson Velasquez, Drew Waters, and Nick Prado. I don't think so, because if the Royals thought anything out of him, I think we would have seen him this year, because they needed him at times, and instead they went with Yuli Gurriel and all these other players. So those are three names that, I don't know if the arrow is pointing up on that. Well, I know it's not pointing up. I think it might be pointing down. But the other thing, I don't know if you have to go out and hand like 3 years to the Seth Lugo of hitting, because what kind of confidence do you have in how quickly someone like Jack Caglione can get up? Someone like Blake Mitchell, someone like Carter Jensen, someone like Gavin Cross. I don't know. I'm not saying this coming year, because it's not like they're in AAA. Like, Carter Jensen was in AA. Blake Mitchell was in high. Jack Caglione was in college.
Yeah, but college bats can move through the system a lot faster than
So
high school
I'm not
bats.
saying that as like they should count on him coming for like September to play right field or first base or something like that. But I think you feel a little bit better about your farm system today than you did a year ago.
Yes.
In that, okay, instead of signing a guy for a 3-year, you can sign, a free agent to a 1-year deal and think, okay, we're going to have another bat that, is sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That makes sense.
It could be wishful thinking. But I think partly because Freddie Fermin was a great story, but he kind of struggled a lot of late, because I think if he was great all year, you could make an argument that, the rotation of Fermin, Salvi, and Pasquantino, that kind of covers your catcher, first base, designated hitter trio. But right now, I look at Fermin as a backup catcher still. And if you put Vinny at first, I think they need a designated hitter and a right fielder. And if you get those two, I really like where this team's at. And I think that's within reason, Gabe. One of those is the leadoff hitter. One of them's middle of the order. Then you give one more year to Maikel Garcia, MJ Melendez, Michael Massey, Kyle Isbell. The rotation is back. You'd like Waka, but if not, okay, then you add it. I like that squad, and I think that's not asking the Royals to go out and sign Juan Soto, okay? That's within reason. And you hope that Nick Lofton can be Adam Frazier, so you don't have to pay Adam Frazier. You hope that Javier Vaz can be Garrett Hampson, so you don't have to pay Adam Frazier, because that adds up. Like,